All right, before I start chapter 2, you can say hi to Murph. Hi, Murph. He's ready for story time. Are you? Okay, chapter 2. The stranger rode from the east. Under the rays of the rising sun, through the dust of the swirling wind, the horseman rode downward. Down Rattlesnake Ridge, just as Black Jack Buck had seen in a vision, dreamed in a prophecy a century ago. In his rifle scabbard, laced low and tight, he carried a baseball bat made of hand-cut mountain maple, custom lathed and sanded to a shine. Some say he rode in on a Santa Ana wind. Some say on the lonesome trail of an elderberry flute. But everyone in this old town, Dillontown, set high in the California wildback near the Mexican line, will always remember that day. It was a day of disaster, following a night of disaster, following several years of discord and disaster. The day Cruz de la Cruz came to town. Monday morning, Tom Gallagher lay in bed listening to the windy rustle of trees outside as a wave of sadness broke inside of him. He hated that feeling. Imagine feeling sad in the middle of a summer vacation. Imagine feeling sad on the first day of baseball camp. But when you knew it would be your last day of baseball camp, ever on that special field, when you knew the mountains you roamed by foot and rode by horseback would soon be scraped off and bulldozed flat, and when you knew it was going to all be your own dumb fault, well, it was hard not to feel sad. If only Tom had known what Doc Altenheimer was going to say last night, he would have kept his mouth shut and avoided the whole mess. But Tom realized that keeping his mouth shut had caused this whole mess. If only he'd spoken up sooner. Tom knew how his parents felt about the deal. Besides, running the Wildcat baseball camp, his mom and dad both worked in the Scrub Oak Community School. "We've got empty shops up Main and down Mercado," his dad said. "We need this housing project to bring in more people and build up the town's tax base. More taxes means more money for schools and for libraries." Tom's mother wouldn't have it. "Our schools and libraries will do just fine without all those dreary look-alike houses, and the traffic, and the noise. When I look out my window, Jerry, I want to see the mountaintops, not the rooftops of new fancy houses. And you used to say the same thing. Besides, it's been proven that mountain views are soothing for the soul. They relax the brain." "Well, sure, I know that, but at some point we need to start thinking about where our money's going to come from. And our mountains don't pay the taxes." For the most part, they'd left it at that, a hot topic that sizzled between them. "Tom, get up!" Frankie Flores ran into the bedroom and cannonballed into his best bud's bed. "Baseball camp, compadre." Tom wrapped the pillow around his head. "Get off, you're suffocating me." Frankie slid down on the floor. "Oh, my girlfriends say the same thing. I leave them breathless." He bopped Tom on the thigh. "Come on, no time to snooze. We gotta cruise and get everything ready, Freddie." Slowly, Tom rolled over. The poor guy, he thought. Frankie didn't realize that the world had changed overnight. This disaster was upon them, and the field where they'd grown up playing one-on-one make-believe ball games, the field where the San Diego Padres battled the New York Yankees for 9 full innings, where the Cubs met the Cardinals or the Mariners met the Mets on the April morning, that was all soon to be a memory. "What's the use?" said Tom. "No one's going to show up now. Nobody wants to get slaughtered in the big game and have everybody blame them for turning Dillontown into the Lakeview on Mesa 2. "You think we're going to get slaughtered? I mean, with me and Will and Jose Maria and Kevin and everybody? Forget it. We are going to be heroes. And you are too." "I'll make sure of that." He backhanded Tom on the leg. "I mean, hey, you're my hermano, my bro, mi vado, eh?" Tom didn't answer. He lay perfectly flat on his back, breathing slowly while staring at the tattered posters of Dante Delgado, the mystery man, on his closet door. After a moment, he shifted his gaze from Delgado to Tony Gwynn and Sammy Sosa, pinned above this computer screen. He always felt like those 3 baseball legends were watching him, ready to offer their wisdom. What would they say now if they thought that he was about to give up? "Hey, buddy," Tony Gwynn would call out. "Get up! Go! Come on! I've told you 100 times. You're a great player." Then Sammy Sosa would add, Tomas, escuche! You got more power than I ever had when I was 12. Come on, what's your secret? But the notorious Dante Delgado, the guy Tom considered to be the most amazing baseball player who ever lived, he would look, he would shrug, and he'd say, "You want to end up like me? Fine, quit. What's stopping you?" Tom kept breathing, relaxing every muscle in his arms, his back, and his shoulders, and even his scalp. Today, he would listen to Sosa and Gwen. "What's with the smile?" said Frankie. "What's so funny?" Tom wiggled his head, then popped up off the bed. Nothing. Later that morning, just before 9, Tom and Frankie headed out the barn door and across the backyard. Over their shoulders, they each carried a bag of baseball gear, balanced high to compensate for the headwind. Mr. Gallagher stepped out of the kitchen and onto the back deck, clutching his clipboard and a box of new baseballs. "Is that barn all cleaned up and ready to go, gentlemen?" The barn had a bunkhouse in the rear where the farmlands used to stay in the olden days. The boys in camp would be using the bathroom and the showers in there. "Clean as my grandma's kitchen," called Frankie. Then he whispered, Don't tell him my grandma raises pigs in the kitchen." "She races pigs in the kitchen?" Tom teased. Frankie didn't miss a step. "Yeah, man, she goes hog wild." As they approached the hen house, Mr. Gallagher caught up and asked, "What's the final tally, Tom?" "The final tally," Tom repeated. The words took a moment to register. He grabbed his blue notebook, his dream sketcher, he called it, from his hip pocket and flipped it open. "Well, we got 4 more cancellations this morning. That leaves maybe 10 who are still coming." 8 was more like it, but for the time being, Tom had penciled in Sosa and Gwen, just in case. Mr. Gallagher sighed. Tom knew he was disappointed. Last year, they'd had over 20 players in the camp. The trio crossed the dirt road and headed toward the baseball diamond on Doc Altenheimer's land. Tom's notebook was his mom's idea. Since his mom was a librarian, Tom had grown up hearing her read stories out of every book in the school library, from the science of baseball to coyote tales. Then, last year, she started buying him special blank books, covered in blue leather that snapped shut with black elastic bands. She said these books were for his own stories, and he carried one with him at all times, since they were just the right size to slip into his pocket. Tom used them for everything, from baseball stats to fantasy tales to sketches of grandma's racing pigs. Sometimes he wrote words, and sometimes he just doodled. Whenever his mind drifted off to someplace interesting, he'd draw what he had just thought, or jot it down in his notebook. Then, later, he'd turn the whole thing into a dream sketch, as he called it. But the book was not a diary. Not a diary, Tom insisted. Nor was it a journal. He wrote no silly secrets in his notebook, no gossip, no blah blah resuscitation of the day's events. He found all that stuff boring. The problem with journals, Tom decided, is that they're always about what is. Tom preferred to write about what if. What if you could saddle up a satellite and ride around the Earth? What if your brain waves could stop the wind and then start it up again? What if a quiet, uncoordinated kid who loves baseball with such pure passion that his passion became his talent? That way a caterpillar becomes a butterfly and turned him into a super mega superstar, even though he's only 12. As Tom crested the rise above the baseball field, his eyes fell upon White Fang Peak, the highest point on Rattlesnake Ridge. Just a few miles away near the top of the peak lived a man who had once had the same kind of passion for baseball that Tom had had. Lots of times during Little League games, Tom had stared at the mountain from his position in right field, thinking about the man on the inside and all of his secrets. The guy was unapproachable, a mumbling recluse of the worst sort, according to all the reports. Still, Tom was fascinated by what he had done. Dante Delgado. Even today, that name alone could scandalize and shambolize the hearts and minds of baseball fans across the land. Back in the early 80s, Delgado was an outfielder for the San Diego Padres. He was the league's most valuable player and batting champ. Not battling. Naturally, he was a hometown hero since he was born and raised right here in Dillontown. He was also the only player in history to ever hit a home run clear out of old Jack Murphy Stadium. A cloud-busting blast, some 545 feet. But on opening day of the '84 World Series, when the Padres were set to face the Detroit Tigers, Dante Delgado was nowhere to be found. Where was he? Nobody knew. He never showed up the whole week, as long as the Tigers ate the Padres for dinner and won the World Series 4-1. He'd been perfect in the playoffs. In 5 games against the Cubs, he went 19 for 19 at the plate. Then he walked away, and no one could even understand why. That is, no one except for Tom. Lots of people had theories, but Tom understood. At least he thought he did. You see, Tom understood disappearing. He would cross the street just to avoid a couple of girls from school. He'd ride into the hills for hours just searching for ancient Indian sites or a big leaf maple tree. So to be hounded by packs of reporters and fans, to be, I don't know, in the public spotlight while trying to play perfect baseball, Tom could imagine the pain and the pressure of that. Of course, he'd never done anything as huge as letting down a ball team that was bound for its very first World Series. Until now. This might do it, he figured. Putting his team in a spot where they had to beat the Lakeview Vikings in order to preserve the town along with 100 years of baseball tradition might one day rank up there with saying adios to a team headed for the series. Before he started down the embankment, Tom spotted the dusty rooster tail from a farm truck rising off the dirt road leading to the ballpark. "Frankie," he said, "here comes your uncle and your snobby cousin Maria. And there's Will Barnes right behind them." Tom watched the vehicles approach, and soon his mood began to change. Soon his ancient baseball field, built in a puny lake bed with plywood-covered grass stands and peeling blue paint. It was a sunken pit, stone-wall dugouts with their sway-backs, timber roofs, and brown tumbleweeds bunched up against the backstop. Soon, the whole bejaggled park was going to become alive with possibilities. It was almost as if the field had a spirit of its own. In all, 7 more baseball campers, 4 boys and 3 girls had arrived, making a grand total of 9. They each crawled up onto the bleachers of the wooden roof while Mrs. Gallagher added their names to the list. Now, at least they had a full team. Clifford Villanova was a surprise. He just moved here from the Pala Indian Reservation up north to live with his grandparents. Clifford sprang up to the top row and sat next to Will, big as Barnes, whose father owned the tack and feed. Below them sat Rachel and Tara Gleason. In the next row, balancing a telescope across his knees, Ramon Sabala tapped away on his handheld computer. On the bottom plank, little Cody Pomeroy, who like Tara was only 11, sat next to Frankie. Right away, Frankie challenged him to a sunflower seed spitting contest. "See if you can hit my cousin," urged Frankie. "Use the wind." Maria Flores, who was tall, strong, and could scare the breath out of any boy in town, shot up when she heard the challenge. "Try it, you little glob of troll snot, and I'll dump you in the trash can and rip off your toes." And everybody knew she would do it. Troll snot, thought Tom. Good words. Secretly, he wrote them down. "Frankie, Cody," said Mr. Gallagher, "appropriate behavior, please." He looked up. "All right, listen, everybody. I need your attention." With those words, Tom drifted off on another thought, far over the stone archway into. In a moment, he leaned back and settled his eyes on an elderberry bush halfway up a nearby hill. Its yellow flowers waved like banners in a stadium, sending Tom off into one of the ballparks in his mind. There he found the stands filled with a roaring crowd. The locker room was a jumble with beard-stubbled men who were bare-chested, suiting up for the game of a lifetime, taping broken fingers to healthy fingers, spitting tobacco juice on blue-black bruises, singing and cussing like 24 bravado boys trying to hide their yard dog jitters. In that world, Tom would talk to these men and would listen. He would snarl his words, and they would whoop and nod, and he would laugh at their fears, and they would laugh louder. Then he would stand and lead them to battle, waving a bat over his head. He would, "Tom," said his father. "Tom, are you with us?" Tom lowered his gaze from White Fang Peak to look at his dad. "Yeah, I'm listening," as he glanced around. I asked you a question. Ramon's mother, Miss Sabala, wondered if we could expect any more players. You said about 10 or so, right? All eyes turned toward Tom. With shaky hands, he opened his dream sketcher, counted the names, and counted heads. Then softly he said, No, no one else. Everybody's here. Only 9 guys, said Will. That's ridiculous. We can't go into that game with only 9 players. No backup, no relievers. What if somebody gets hurt? That's not really what he meant, Tom. And everybody else knew that Will really meant that they couldn't get into the big game with these 9 players. More specifically, they were bound to lose with the starting lineup that included Tara, Cody, and Tom. Mr. Gallagher studied the squad. Well, I see a scrappy bunch here, but before we talk about relief pitchers, first, we'll need a starting pitcher. Mr. Gallagher studied the squad. Well, I'll pitch, piped up Maria. And I can't even pitch, but so what? We'll have to play this game and we have to win, and I don't want tons of people coming up here and seeing us lose. Clifford jumped in. She's right. Besides, who are these guys? A bunch of all-stars? He grinned at everybody with a bunch of white teeth that shined against his dark skin. But Clifford had only been here since January, so he actually didn't know that, yes, in fact, the Vikings, they were a team of all-stars. Oh man, thought Tom, what a disaster. What did I get us into? This game will be pure humiliation for all of us. Frankie stood. I say we get more players. Come on, Tom. Let's call some guys up. What about Jose Maria? Where's Kevin? Where's Troy? They all canceled this morning. Their email said they're going down to the hill to a soccer camp. Frankie slumped. Traitors. Exactly, said Maria. So forget those guys. Forget anybody who didn't have the guts to show up. Hey, we got 9. That's enough. Then an idea hit Tom like a beanball, bonking his helmet. What if I didn't show up? If I drop out, that'll just leave 8. Not enough for a team, so then there'd be no game. Then Doc would have to make up his own mind, and this time I'd help him. Yes, that's perfect. I'll quit. On the ball field, a dust devil kicked up, swirling around home plate. Several sun-dried candy wrappers lifted up into the sky. Tom sat back watching, but he could not relax. Was this really what he wanted to do? And could he do it? Could he make himself announce to everybody that he was quitting? As he looked out towards White Fang Peak, a doubt began to rise. Dante Delgado had quit, and look what happened to him. But what else could Tom do? This was all his fault. What else was he possibly to do? He clutched his dream sketcher to his ribs to keep from shaking. He closed his eyes, took a breath, and he felt the wind blow stronger. But before he could sputter a sound, Tara stood up and pointed into the distance. Hey! Look at that! All heads turned. Cresting over the dirt bank beyond center field came a horse and a rider. Everyone watched as the horseman slowly made his way down the steep bank and through the iron gates beneath the stone archway. Do you believe this? Said Frankie. Not yet, said Will. Straight through the center field he rode. Stretched along the back of his speckled white horse was a duffel bag and bedroll. The rider, Tom could now see, was a boy, about 12 years old, wearing a scruffy cowboy hat, blue jeans, black boots, and a pearl buttoned shirt. He rode up on home plate. Burned into the skirt of the saddle of fancy black letters were the words, CruzOn.com. Full saddlebags hung down on both sides next to his knee, and a leather rifle scabbard he carried a wooden baseball bat. The boy dismounted and led his horse through the side gate near the dugout and underneath the grandstand canopy where the players sat like frogs, alert. The stranger removed his crumpled Stetson. Morning, he said. Buenos dias. He looked at everybody with a shy grin. Is this the world-famous Dillontown Wildcats baseball camp?